So good to see the three of us on the presentation together. So I'll make sure everyone can hear me all right, and I'm coming in perfect. Great, wonderful. I got new headphones, so can never be too sure. I guess I'll start out today. I just want to thank everyone for attending our session. My name is Anna, and I'm the project's manager and digital curator for Defining Moments Canada, or DMC for short, which you'll hear a few of us call it. Defining Moments Canada is, as Renee kind of touched upon, we're a digital heritage education space dedicated to commemorating definitional moments in our shared histories across Canada. Um, some of our past projects have explored scientific or medical history. So DMC began with a commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Spanish flu. And shortly after that, we completed a project on the 100th anniversary of the discovery and development of insulin. And then from there, we did Hertzberg 50 that looked at Dr. Gerhard Hertzberg's Nobel Prize for his work in spectroscopy. And then after that project, and in conjunction with Insulin 100, we completed the much larger Nobel Canadian project that explored the works and legacies of each of Canada's Nobel Prize winners. So that's obviously in science and medicine, but also in literature and in peace prizes as well. So DMC is also, we have also delved into a bit of military history as well. On our website, you'll find the Juno 75 and VE Day 75 projects. And those go into the events and some of the lived experiences of the Second World War. We have also recently completed In Defense of Hope's Profound. And that's a project that showcases the individual stories of people from marginalized communities that participated in the Korean War. You can also discover more about the larger history of the Korean War in the project that we were talking to you about today, Realizing the Pledge. So most recently, DMC has kind of focused in on projects that commemorate more of a social and human rights history. We have just completed the Bryce 100 project that looks at the work and legacy of Dr. Peter Henderson Bryce in regards to residential schools in Canada. Amanda was actually the project's coordinator on that, and then Renee did some wonderful work on that project as well. We have also recently completed the All for Nine project, which showcases and explores the history of labor activism in Canada, starting with the 1872 9-hour movement and the printer strikes in Ontario. So both these projects were showcased in part on previous days of this wonderful Ignite Change conference. So if you would like to see any of those projects that I've mentioned, you're free to go on to definingmomentscanada.ca and click on the projects tab at the top bar to see all the projects that we have had the honor of working on. Each of our projects includes historical articles, lesson plans, teaching tools, videos, art, story maps, and just so much more. My favorite thing about a DMC project is that we like to highlight the stories of individuals who participated in these major events, but for one reason or another, do not get a lot of the spotlight. We call these the microhistories, and they are an essential component to any DMC project. So before I pass things along to Amanda and Renee, just a few words on the project we're talking about today. So Realizing the Pledge delves into the history and the meaning of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, drafted, as we all know, in part by Canadian John Humphreys and adopted in 1948 by the United Nations. So our project begins with the drafting of the UDHR and the armistice marking the end of the Korean War in 1953, which we argue is a pivotal moment in Canada's identity as a peacekeeping nation on the international stage. So Realizing the Pledge uses the articles, or if you go onto our project page, you'll see those as commitments to, of the UDHR to highlight moments when Canada's involvement in international or domestic affairs embrace the aspirational spirits of the declaration itself. To explore more about this project again, I encourage you to visit our website. So with all that said, I'm going to pass things on to Amanda and Renee. We're all here to hear about the good educational stuff that they've been working on. So I just want to thank you all again for attending our session today, and I'll pass it along to Amanda.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you today. I'm Amanda. I'm the Education Manager at Defining Moments Canada. I'm calling in from Toronto, Treaty 13 territory. It's the afternoon here right now, and we have some natural sunlight, a bit gray, but it's here. It's happening. I'm so delighted to be here. I'm going to pass to Renee really briefly because Renee has just prepared such a wonderful presentation. She's been an education collaborator with us for a while now, and I don't want to steal too much of her thunder, but I will I will say our education work at Defining Moments is really grounded in an anti-oppressive pedagogy and in centering student agency and student voice. And it's really important for us. The way that we work is we bring on collaborators we've worked with before or new collaborators for each project. So our projects are really emergent. The teams are built based on the expertise and the lived experience of our collaborators. And it's really important for us that educators in formal and in informal settings with lived experience as equity seeking groups or identities at the intersection of those get to speak about their experiences or their perspectives on social and human rights history as we're engaging with it. So my experience is as a queer and disabled woman in the world, and right, that is the intersection that I'm living at. I'm also white, and I don't create all of the resources. I help facilitate the teams of people that come together to create them. And Renee is one of the wonderful collaborators that I get to work with, and hilarious, which I'm sure you will see briefly. I did want to say that when we were working on the education components for realizing the pledge, which some of them are online now and some of them we're still adding to the website, we're really interested, and I think this is really important when we're talking about human rights education, in micro and macro perspectives. So from the macro, looking at how did we come to be in a situation in the world where the UDHR was necessary? What are the impacts of the UDHR? What are the lived realities of the way in which the UDHR does or does not impact how Canada as a state engages in human rights, how other states engage in human rights, how we experience the application of those rights at a larger level, and how different equity-seeking groups can meet in solidarity. So looking at large-scale patterns. And then we're also really interested in the micro because we don't want the macro to erase the specificity of different groups' experiences, or the specificity of looking at how Canada, for example, as a state, engages in commitments to different groups, and the complexities of how either does or does not succeed in engaging in and meeting commitments towards certain groups. And the micro is really important for us as well. So our approach is to do both of those things and offer both of those things in our resources in ways that really support student voice and student agency. Most of our resources are geared at really grade 6 to grade 12 across the country. They're not specific to a provincial curriculum, but I think you'll see in Renee's presentation today that this could be adapted across grade levels into the post-secondary, or if you're organizing outside of like a formal education setting, you're an organizer with a local activist group, you're a social media coordinator, that the principles that Renee is talking about in terms of how do we engage in thinking about our relationship to these commitments, and then teaching others about what we think about these things. How do we share those reflections? How do we engage authentically in those kinds of dialogues? I think that will be applicable across whatever context you're arriving from today. So even though Renee is going to focus on really more of a micro perspective and make some larger connections, and on engaging more in a formal classroom setting, I think it's super relevant across all kinds of different environments. So I'm really excited. I'm going to stop talking, pass to Renee, and then I'll come back at the end if folks have questions for both of us, or I'll be in the chat as well. I will be sharing the slides though, so I'll still be here in the background. So I'll introduce Renee, who will speak about herself, position and introduce herself. And thank you so much again for having us.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So today, as Amanda mentioned, we're going to be talking about the UDHR in Canada, specifically reflecting on how it is that we can integrate this text into classrooms or engaging with younger learners or youth. There's so many different entry points into this work, and we'll be delving into that together. So let's briefly touch on what our presentation will focus on. I've done a bit of breaking up, or scaffolding, as we like to call it, as educators. So we're discussing the making of, where I'll reflect a little bit on my process of making some of these educational resources. Let's Build a Lesson goes into the actual breakdown of the lessons that I've created that connect to the UDHR. And the last segment of the presentation is the UDHR in practice. So we'll be doing a small activity together where you have the opportunity to engage in one of the lessons that I have put together. So first, we're going to be talking about the making of. And before we get to that, I'm going to be talking a little bit about myself. So my name is Renee Allen. My pronouns are she, her. I am a Toronto-based educator and writer. I immigrated from Jamaica 12 years ago. That's a huge part of my identity as a Black immigrant woman. I often reflect on what it means to be an immigrant and what it means to be positioned in the educational space that I am. Um, Most recently, I was talking to my mom, and she mentioned that my grandparents actually, the highest level of education that they attained was grade 6 and grade 9. And for me as an educator, knowing that I come from an ancestry of folks who didn't necessarily have the access to certain education, but still forged a path for someone like me to show up and speak here today, that really means a lot to me. So even though I stand right now as Renee, I carry those people and those experiences with me. And it's funny, I never actually thought that I would have become an educator. It's actually the last thing that I wanted to do. My mom is a teacher, so don't tell her that. But I always wanted to be a foreign correspondent. So human rights and activism has really been at the forefront of my mind. I've always wanted to tell stories and amplify the voices of folks who are marginalized and oppressed. And I think that currently, in my capacity as an educator and a writer, I've been able to do that in this space. So I'm going to say something that might be a little bit controversial for some teachers. I know that the 3-part lesson is something that is often pioneered as the way that we kind of go about teaching and structuring our lessons, but I'm here to kind of disrupt that a little bit and, in a sense, say farewell to the 3-part lesson. There's so much learning that exists outside of this very narrow continuum of the minds-on, the action, and the consolidation. And sometimes when we construct lessons in a way that departs from that, we can create space and room for the experiences of our learners. We can create more thoughtful and intentional lessons because learning doesn't begin and end at a specific point. It exists in a continuum. And we want to be able to honor these experiences by cultivating lessons that do just that. So this meme, and you'll notice quite a few memes throughout my presentation, kind of encapsulates what it is that my unit planning or lesson planning strategy kind of looks like. It is a little bit of organized chaos at the beginning, where I'm essentially just trying to find lots of points of different things that I want to engage in. I might start with a specific entry point. In this context, I was thinking about the UDHR in terms of how can we make it applicable and manageable for students, because the text as itself, though it's important, it's equally important to show students how it lives and breathes outside of the classroom context. And within these lessons, for me, that was a focus on climate justice, which is another cause that is deeply important to me. And a part of that as well is that student focused approach, where we're really trying to engage students in really thoughtful, critical thinking. And we're trying to do so in a way that really activates and empowers them and allows them to assert their agency. One question that kind of came to mind was, the UDHR, but how do we make it fun? And human rights at its core is deeply rooted in activism and challenging a lot of the status quo. And I think for these lessons, a huge part of why I tried to kind of steer clear of the three-part lesson was I wanted to do it in a way that really honored the students' capacity to think and make conclusions for themselves, as well as have really thoughtful, engaging conversations with their peers in the classroom, or if you're in a non-traditional classroom context, just a way to spark and engage some type of thought-provoking conversation. And I think what's really important about the UDHR is when the text is able to exist outside of just reflecting on the articles, students are able to see how it is that human rights shows up in the context of the world outside the classroom. Present day, there are a multitude of opportunities for students to reflect on this. And I think a huge part of that is not only showing students what these articles are, but showing them how it is that we can deeply reflect on them and allow those to be a site of agency. So, as I've mentioned, I use quite a bit of memes in this presentation and in my work in general because I find that memes are a really critical way to engage our large age range of students who have varied experiences or come from different cultural contexts and identities. Memes are very prolific throughout social media. They have been kind of sparking points for a lot of different social movements, and they're a great way to spark conversation as well as share information in really succinct ways. So I think by using memes within this context or other educational contexts, it's a great opportunity for students to see something that's reflected in their everyday life, but know that there is value in it outside of just sharing something on Twitter or Instagram. It can be a really impactful way to disseminate information. And a huge part of my pedagogy, this slide, I titled it "A Seat at the Teacher's Table" because I don't necessarily believe in that traditional idea of the teacher being the keeper or holder of all of the knowledge. I think it's really important for teachers to decenter their expertise and cultivate an environment where our students are able to share their own ideas. I think students have such a wealth of knowledge to share with us, and that really starts with fostering the type of classroom community where they feel like their perspectives and their voices can take up space in a really meaningful way, and that we can really honor their perspectives through our teaching, and also allowing them to guide and question some of the information that we present to them as well. So now we're going to go a little bit into the lessons that I've specifically built around the UDHR, and I'll share some of the background that I kind of went into when I was building these lessons. So the first lesson, it's called a temperature check. So the way this lesson is structured, it's built around a Google Slides presentation, which is essentially just a package that an educator might take from the website, DMC's website, and it has a series of information about the UDHR. It focuses on a lot of key pivotal moments in history, as well as how it's applicable within the Canadian context. And the purpose of the temperature check is for the educator to kind of gauge what's their students' understandings. If you notice on the left-hand side of the thermometer, there's just kind of a legend that indicates three different levels of the students' understandings. So it's either they're feeling very confident, they're feeling somewhat confident and knowledgeable, and they're kind of unsure about a topic. And on the right-hand side, you'll notice a series of questions versus statements. So the questions kind of pose an opportunity for the students to reflect on specific items about the UDHR, and based on their understanding, they kind of shade in to reflect what it is that they know. And this thermometer allows the educator to determine what are some gaps in a student's understanding, as well as how it is that they might go forward with these lessons, if there's specific things that a students have a stronger foundation in that they might need to build on, or what are some ways that they can work collaboratively to really facilitate a deeper understanding of these topics. And for lesson 1 and 2, the first lesson in this series, the Paris Agreement is burning. I really like puns. I really like memes. This first lesson, it's centered around the Paris Agreement, and it's an opportunity for students to reflect on the commitments that Canada has made in signing on to the Paris Agreement, and determine whether or not they've kind of been moving in a way that aligns with those commitments. A huge part of learning, I think, is to present students with the information and see how it is that they can kind of critically reflect on it and make their own conclusions. I think that invites really engaging and important dialogue. And the way that this lesson is framed, a huge part of that is students coming up with their own metric to measure what it is that Canada has done so far in terms of aligning with their commitments. So one of the examples that I put forward in this lesson is a meme metric. So the memes at the very beginning of this timeline kind of get at they're doing a great job, things are kind of moving and progressing in a good way. And farther on the right end of the spectrum, you might notice that SpongeBob is kind of running around in circles and everything is on fire. And I think sometimes visual representations really aid students in making those real world connections. Because for students who might not always connect to words or a specific text, sometimes visuals that represent those ideas and those words help them to convey information in that way. And for lesson 2, we focus on whose garbage is it anyways. This is another pun where we're focusing on the a few years ago when there was some garbage, Canada's garbage that was sent to the Philippines, and we're reflecting on what it means to create to create waste. That's a bit of a tongue twister. To create waste in the West, to create waste in the West. And what are the implications of that for folks that live in areas like the global South? And a part of this is integrating this documentary that is by the BBC that focuses on dead man's waste, our dead white man's clothes, which is a phenomena that happens a lot in West Africa. Specifically, this documentary focuses on Ghana, where there's a lot of textile waste that gets exported, and it deeply affects their ecosystems and their rivers. And it's another opportunity to bring in a real world example into the classroom and for students to reflect on what it means as a consumer in the West and how that affects folks outside of our periphery. And for lesson 3 and 4, we focus on to consume or not to consume. Um, Again, I use this meme of Oprah who saying, "Are you consuming or are you being consumed?" And it talks a lot about influencer culture, especially for young people. Whenever they're exploring social media, one kind of personality or type of person that they might engage with is the influencer. And it can be really hard to discern if it is that the information that they're being provided with is someone's genuine reflection on a product, for example, or is this some type of advertisement that's meant to convince someone to buy something? So, reflecting on our consumption habits and overconsumption is really pivotal for students to examine how it is that climate justice is connected to overconsumption and capitalism. And an important part of this is a Padlet, where students have an opportunity to create their own de-influencing video. And de-influencing, for those who aren't familiar, is kind of the anti-influencer um, trend that's kind of happening over the last few months, where folks are trying to kind of be a little bit more intentional about what it is that we're buying and how it is that we can move away from overconsumption to being more intentional about shopping. So with the Padlet, what I've done is try to generate or replicate that same social media experience where students are posting their videos and other students within the classroom are able to comment and like. And I think what's really important about this is we're replicating that same social media a type of experience without necessarily having to rely on X or Threads or another platform, and you're able to make it more controlled and more safe for students. Now we're going to be talking about the case of Shein as well, which is lesson 4. So this is personally one of my favorite lessons because the case of Shein delves into the fast fashion brand Shein, which is quite popular, especially among young people because it is very affordable. It's very trendy clothing. But with this, it all comes at a cost. And with this lesson, the students are examining the UDHR and they're using it to reflect on Shein as a corporation, as well as how it is that their specific actions have impacted climate justice initiatives and what it means for folks to continue to purchase at a website like Shein. But what's really important to know within this lesson is though we want to provide students with this opportunity to reflect on consumption and fast fashion, it's also not an opportunity for educators to shame or judge or make students feel uncomfortable about any decisions that they make. Ultimately, it's really important to handle this type of topic with a lot of care and just try to present information to students in a way that is as non-judgmental as possible. And if educators are comfortable, it's also really helpful to be transparent about your own journey in terms of trying to be more intentional with the things that you're purchasing or trying to maybe support more local businesses or thrifting or just more intentional shopping. So I think always trying to frame it in a way that provides students with a feeling of empowerment, I think is really helpful. And now we're going to discuss lesson 5 and the culminating activity. So lesson 5 is paper or plastic straws. Because the little background about this lesson, I was talking with a friend about how ironic it is that we are given paper straws, but we're still using plastic cups. And a question that kind of came to mind for me was, do ethical brands exist, or can consumerism be ethical under capitalism? And even though these are really big, overarching questions, I think it's really important to be able to present information as questions so that students can provide their experience or their expertise based on an entry point that's most comfortable for them. So I might reflect on this question very differently than a student might, and it really provides that opportunity for multiple entry points and really fruitful discussion. And the final point within this unit plan is a culminating activity called Global Boiling. And again, it starts off by guiding the learner through a series of questions because the intention is that they'll be creating a meme essay at the end where they're kind of showcasing or presenting their ideas around climate justice. And what's really interesting about these questions, again, is depending on a student's lived experiences, their identity, their positionality, we'll get a multitude of responses. And I think that really provides an opportunity for students to choose an entry point that is most applicable to them and their lived experiences. And it allows them to speak from a place of experience and expertise, or even if there's something that they're curious about, it allows them to have the agency to go off and do their own exploration into some of these topics. So now we're going to be doing a small activity where we put the UDHR in practice. So I've adapted that culminating activity that I just spoke about into a smaller bite-sized activity for us to do together. So together, we're going to explore 3 memes in the upcoming slides. See, I told you I really like memes. Based on your ideas about climate justice and the UDHR, you're going to be creating captions for each meme with a maximum of 20 words. You'll be exploring themes like global boiling and tangible ways to address the climate crisis. Be creative and work at your own pace. And if you're comfortable, please go ahead and post your responses in the chat, or you can note them down privately, whatever is most comfortable for you. So this first meme, I actually have so many memes that there is a folder on my phone that is solely dedicated to them. So all of these memes come from my personal collection. So this first one, this character, if you're unfamiliar with, um, is named Ralph. They're from The Simpsons. So they're sitting on a school bus, at the back of the school bus. They're chuckling. They're saying, "I'm in danger." So if you were to reflect on what is this idea of climate justice in the context of the UDHR, what is the type of caption that you might use to encapsulate this? Rising sea levels and natural disasters happening more and more every year. Yes, I think that's a really great caption because it really encapsulates the reality that a lot of different countries are facing within this context. Specifically for me, as someone that is from Jamaica, being on an island and recognizing how one of our biggest infrastructures, our airport, is actually located on a peninsula that is a little bit below, um, or in a few years will be a little bit below sea level. I think this is a really great way to encapsulate the reality of countries like that. The fires are coming. Yes, it is not a question of if the fires come. Unfortunately, it is when. And that's definitely something that we've seen over this past summer. And someone in the chat says humor is a perfect teacher. Definitely, I think in the context of the classroom, humor is a really great entry point into introducing students to really heavy topics and trying to find ways that engage them through humor. So our next meme, it smells performative in here. This is a personal a favorite. So when we reflect on performative action or performative ways that folks might engage in climate justice, what's a type of caption that we might generate? I think this caption is for the previous meme. When you see climate change deniers rolling coal to spite the world, that's a really great one. We have another one when Justin Trudeau says Canada is doing a lot. I think this would be a really great caption to engage students in reflecting on what it is that political leaders are saying they're doing about climate justice versus what does that look like on the ground, especially for marginalized communities. I think that's a really engaging caption. I think for me, when I think about performative action, I think about I've noticed a few folks have pointed this out in the chat, but reflecting on this idea of the ethical brand or thrift shops or any folks that kind of position themselves as doing good for the environment. But being able to have students critically reflect and investigate a little bit more in terms of what it is that this looks like in practice versus relying solely on the policies or the greenwashing statements that are made on a website. And we'll go to the last one. So it says me, colonial restrictions on our imagination. And this person is refusing that. Decolonization is a huge part of climate justice. And I think this is what this meme is getting at. So I'll welcome folks to share captions if they'd like. Someone in the chat says, shipped in from Peru. When college campuses show race diversity in their advertisements. I think that's another really great example of what it means for folks to buy into the optics of liberation, but not necessarily be doing the work in action. So I think that's a really great way to encapsulate that. Okay, so that was the last meme. You all did really great work. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to participate within this discussion. And I just want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to this presentation and for giving me the space to share my memes, as well as sharing my ideas around how we can make the UDHR applicable for students.
Renee, I love these memes so much. Renee knows when we looked over this presentation, I laughed the whole time. And I laughed the whole time this time too. But I think something that I think is so important, first of all, you're an excellent meme creator. Something that I think is so important to amplify about the work you've done in this unit and what's coming up in the chat is that, first of all, hilarious, amazing work, but that humor is such a meaningful way for us to find like-minded people, like on social, not just for students, but on social media, like ways that you can recognize that you're in solidarity with other people or that other people might have a stake in the fight that you're fighting as well. That it's like such a fast way, the visual with the words, to recognize other people and to quickly message someone and be like, oh my God, yes, I'm in this meme with you. Like if you share this meme, we're in it together. But also, as you were talking, I was thinking about how effective humor is in getting people to change their minds without shaming them or embarrassing them. That seeing something like a meme and having a moment where you laugh and you're like, oh, maybe I have to like disrupt a long-held belief that I have because this is funny. And maybe it is true. Maybe it's like piercing something that I've already been thinking about for a long time or that I never thought to think about. But because there's humor involved in it, it doesn't embarrass people, perhaps, to think about the ways in which they might change their minds. And I think that's really important with students in their stage of development, but also adults. Like I think I think no apologies for engaging in so much fantastic meme work. I think it was wonderful. We're so grateful to have you. And I did say this in the chat that your whole unit plan will be available on our website in English and in French in the new year for free for folks to access. And Renee has also developed, just to plug Renee, a wonderful material as part of our labor history project, All for Nine, and also for our Bryce at 100 project. So I'm going to pop over to your last slide here. Did you want to jump in and say anything else, Renee, before we take questions?
No, I just want to say thank you. A huge part of the work that I do is grounded in community and collaboration. So even if you have a question that you don't think of in this moment and it comes to you later, you can feel free to email me at the email on the screen. And then, as Amanda mentioned, please go to Defining Moments Canada and check out the wealth of resources and expertise and knowledge that's housed there as well.
I think we have a brief 2 minutes if folks had any questions that they want to drop in the chat. And it's also okay if you don't, or any feedback. Renee, I'm going to put your email in the chat as well. I also think, Renee, we talked about this before, that this would be a great activity in a post-secondary classroom as well. That undergraduate students or grad students, like asking them to engage in this kind of summarizing, like the concision that's required of a big idea into the application of creating the meme, I think we both thought would be super relevant even for older students.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really the strength of the meme, is it provides an entry point for a wide range of folks. So for this, if you show the same meme to someone in 6th grade and someone who is all the way up until post-secondary, the difference in responses is really something that could be quite interesting and provide great dialogue.
Well, thank you. I think we're at the end of our time. We made it. How wonderful. And I know other Renee is in the background.
I know. I never have a namesake in the same room. This is really awesome. So.
It's wonderful.
Well, that was really fun, Renee. And, you could see people's brains going and where you could take these things. And I never thought of you. I'm my generation. I think I definitely feeling my age as we're talking about the approaches to education, and really appreciate that. So thank you both for this work. Defining Moments Canada. Everybody, please check them out. Next year, as these resources get out there, let's amplify, let's push them. And I hope that we can kind of keep doing that. So thank you both, Amanda, Renee, and Anna, for taking the time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.